afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeju Park. I'm the president of KAKUNS, the Korean Academic Council under United Nations system, which is co-organizing this event along with the Jeju Peace Institute and the Korean Indo-Pacific and Euro-Atlantic Hub for the shared security challenges. On behalf of organizers, I'd like to warmly welcome and thank you, all of you, for joining us today. In particular, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to our distinguished moderators, speakers, and discussants. Some of you may not be familiar with the Korean Indo-Pacific and Euro-Atlantic Hub. It is a virtual network established in Korea last year with financial support from NATO headquarters in Brussels. Similar hubs have also been established in other IP4 countries, namely Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. These hubs aim to promote security cooperation and policy dialogue between the Indo-Pacific and Euro-Atlantic regions. The Korean Hub currently brings together Yonsei University's Graduate School of International Studies, Hangul University of Foreign Studies Graduate School of International and Area Studies, the Sejong Institute, East Asia Institute, and the KAKUNS. Given our limited time, without further ado, it is my great honor to introduce the moderator, Ambassador Kim Sook. Ambassador Kim is a distinguished career diplomat whose areas of expertise include Korea-US relations, inter-Korean relations, and the North Korean nuclear issues. Ambassador Kim served as permanent representative of Republic of Korea to the United Nations from July 2011 to September 2013, during which he led the Korean delegation during the country's tenure on the United Nations Security Council in 2013. Ambassador Kim also served as co-chair of the Bureau of the preparatory process of the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development, better known as Rio+20, and as president of the Executive Board of the United Nations Women in 2012. He currently serves as executive director of the Ban Ki-moon Foundation for a Better World, for a better future. Please join me in welcoming Ambassador Kim Sook.
Well, thank you, Mr. Park, for the kind and generous introduction. And welcome to the participants on the floor as well as up in the stage. I wish to express my sorry for the inclement weather. And I just mentioned briefly to Ambassador PURCARESCU, and I said, I'm sorry for this weather. And she said, no, you think about French weather. It's over 40 degrees. So I think it's always we're on the principle of relativity. Great Einstein's idea, and we need to look always to the bright side of the life and the world as well. Our topic today is cooperation between NATO and Indo-Pacific partners in the Pacific 4 and the role of ROK. We are undergoing an era of significant change in the world geopolitics, evolving alliance relations, and various ramifications stemming from them, especially since 2020, the notorious year that Russia invaded Ukraine, especially since 2020, US allies both in Europe, NATO, so to speak, and in Asia, mainly in the Pacific 4, that are ROK, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand, felt the urgent need to come up with renewed security posture and adapted defense policy. So these two groups have been seeking out each other as like-minded partners with shared values, strategic objectives, and interest. And the statement between NATO Secretary General and the 4 Indo-Pacific partners in the context of the NATO summit in The Hague in June last year was the manifesto of strong mutual understanding and desire for that matter. So this session aims to examine ways to strengthen NATO-IP4 cooperation and expand its scope beyond the traditional domain. And it also intends to review the possible area where the Republic of Korea can make positive contribution in the process as a global security partners. Without further ado, let me introduce 5 participants here. 3 presenters and 2 discussants. First, to my left, Ambassador Donna PURCARESCU, in charge of Indo-Pacific of the French Ministry of Europe and Foreign Affairs. She has come all the way from Paris, and thank you for participating. And joining online, Ms. Sophie LARDER, Indo-Pacific officer at the NATO headquarters. Are you there, Ms. LARDER? I hope she is. And next, Dr. Park Dong-Joon, Director of Research, Jeju Peace Institute, and Dr. Lee Shin-hwa, Professor at the Department of Political Science and International Relations, and she is taking the job of the President, Institute of Interdisciplinary Unification Studies at Korea University. And lastly, Ambassador Kim Hyung-jin, former ROK ambassador to the European Union in Brussels. Thank you for joining us at this forum. And without further ado, let me give the floor to Ambassador PURCARESCU.
Thank you very much. I hope you hear me well. I am particularly delighted to be in Jeju. First of all, because seeing swaying trees in the wind, it's a very refreshing sight after my trip from Paris. But also, it's a privilege to be in Korea for the 140th anniversary of diplomatic relations between France and Korea. And I think we had a very fruitful year with my president visit to Korea, and with my colleagues we are preparing your president visit, state visit to Paris in September. And also we are lucky enough to have him already in France for the G7 summit a few days ago, where Korea was associated. And I think it's, you know, in the diplomatic area we like symbols, but we also like them when they teach us lessons. And I think the G7 participation of Korea was a great example of getting together. There's no better way. You know very well. You're living, you know, on a front line in Korea. In Europe, we also have an open war on our territory, which we spent 70 years trying to make it impossible and avoiding it, but it's still happening. So every time we get the opportunity to talk about diplomacy, to talk about cooperation, to talk about getting together and listen to each other, I think it's already a victory over challenging conditions and environment. So thank you for having me here. I'm looking forward to a fruitful discussion. I'm very humbled by the combined experience of the people on this stellar panel, and I kept one word from your presentation among the others, is the interdisciplinary field. And I think, Professor, you're here to remind us that nobody has a single solution. The solutions are found when we get together. And when we put our experiences to the service of an objective. And I think in an increasingly complex environment, interdisciplinarity is the only way ahead. So we are here to discuss about the NATO and the IP4 cooperation, and in particular the role of Korea. So just to make sure everybody is on board with the framework, the reason why NATO is working with the Indo-Pacific partners, with the 4 of them that are the most actively engaged in cooperation, is quite simple, is interdependency. You can't say that you're on one side of the world and you're protected from what's happening on the other. I think interconnectedness, it's full of opportunities for us, but it's also a daily reminder of our potential vulnerabilities when one of our partners, one of the countries that are thinking alike and putting the most importance on values, shared values, democracy, open societies. When we are open, when we are democratic, we care for each other, we care for the others. And I think this is very deeply felt in South Korea, given to its history and its very complex neighborhood. So you mentioned in your introductory the joint statement between the NATO Secretary General and the IP4. What's inside this statement? You don't have to read it all. I'm giving you just a quick summary. 2 things. It's saying we are interconnected, therefore we have to show solidarity. And it says, let's never forget that we share values. And these values are our guide into what areas of discussion we are looking at and how we are looking at. Because the method is probably more important than the end result. The method is what is bringing us together. So the discussion back in the summit in La Haye started around the common values, recognizing that the security of one of us is the security of the collective living together around the world. And it also was a very strong symbol of support to Ukraine. Because what is at play in Ukraine is not only the situation of the people on the ground, it's also the situation and the attack on our values. And in our the instruments that we put together slowly and painfully over years in order to have a multilateral, functioning, efficient international cooperation. And what is at stake in Ukraine is the basic tenets of international law, which is territorial integrity and non-aggression. And I think we have to start every meeting by reminding that this is why we're getting together. We are getting together to safeguard the rules that make every conversation possible afterwards. So another element that is important, and I think it binds together NATO countries and the IP4, is that we all value transparency. We are all aiming at being predictable partner for each other. And I think in a world where we have an acceleration and multiplication of crises, being a reliable, predictable partner is the most reassuring thing we can bring to each other. And I think this is at play in what we are doing. And transparency, I strongly believe, it's a key factor of stability. I think that's the only way to achieve it. And we all need stability, and we all need to have enough energy and resources to improve the well-being of our citizens. And without predictability and stability, it's much harder to achieve. So this is what we can bring together. So now that we know what we need, how do we do it? And what can South Korea bring to the table? I think the first and most important element is that we need to continue our dialogue in order to learn from each other. we all live in different parts of the world, and we all have very specific national history, experiences, social structures, and the fact that we are bringing this together on the table in a transparent manner, again, I will keep repeating values and transparency. The fact that we are bringing together, it's making each of us stronger. We don't wish to experience war, we don't wish to experience challenges, but if we are sharing this experience, we are prepared to face them. So I think that's the basic point of it, and it's difficult to measure it, but it's the most important thing that we are learning from each other. The challenges we are facing particularly over the last years are the same across the world. We all have issues with the security of supply chains, and we all resent the fact that coercion is used in order to manage supply chains. And I think this is something that it's easy to say what's the problem, it's a bit more difficult to find the solution. But again, this is what we need. We need integrity of our supply chains across the world, wherever we are positioned on the globe. And you know, France has territories on all the 3 oceans, so whatever is happening somewhere is affecting the livelihood of our fellow citizens. So we also need to enhance the resilience of our own industrial bases. That's also a very important point, because nobody wants, you know, the first wave of globalization was removing production chains. Now everybody is aware that this is making us vulnerable, and we need to face together. And again, if we aim for a zero-sum game, it's not good. We have to find win-win situations and solutions. So this is something that we bring to the table, and South Korea is a lesson to the whole world on resilience of industrial base, on transformation of the industrial base in order to adapt to challenges. And I think you know, we are aware of the problem in Europe, but we have a lot to learn from Korea. More specific about defense capabilities, and I think my colleague from NATO will also discuss it, interoperability. Because it's one thing to politically want to work together, it's another thing to actually deliver it. And that's a key element in order to be able to work together, but also in order for our markets to be open to everyone. And I think it's really, that's the point, it's a two-way street, interoperability. It's not only one benefiting, it's everybody being able to play at the same level together. And the fact that we become interoperable, it's increasing industrial opportunities for everyone, not for only one partner. I think we all benefit from it. It's and you're well aware that we are now on the fringe of a technological revolution. We are going to witness and live through a tremendous change in the technologies that are developed in our daily lives, but also on the battlefield. So how do we manage this change, which is happening at a very fast pace, posing a lot of challenges to governance, the way we used to know how to handle these issues. So there again, we need to look at it together. If we start everybody in their own corner, nobody's going to be able to manage and to channel the energy of the new technologies, the frontier technologies. So at the pace of progress and change in those areas, if we don't sit together with all our very human brain power and our own humanity to look at it, we are going to lose the race against the machines. So I think that's a very powerful message to take from every discussion. There's no way one single country can master the challenges of the frontier technologies. That's impossible. It's beyond reach for us. So the only way we still have a chance to do that if we get together, if we use all the interdisciplinary studies, because we don't have the time to experiment in every line of work on every aspect of application of these technologies. We need the interdisciplinarity by design from the start in order to look at it. So my message here is very simple. Getting back to values and transparency, these two things are guiding us. We will be able to develop some governance that is satisfactory and delivering for the common good. So Where do we have to look? You know, we still have frontiers. We still not on land, but we still have undersea and in the space. We still have frontiers to conquer. And the best way to do it and the best way to prepare for the future and the future generation is to deliver together on these issues. So thank you very much. I was already a bit too long, but I'm looking forward to your question.
Yes. Very good expression of your insightful opinion, and I noted that in your using terminology, you used several occasion the terminology that begins with prefix inter, interdependency, interdisciplinary, interconnectedness, interoperability, which means we have to base ourselves on the shared value. So interdependency as a result of interconnectedness is very, very important, as the Professor Lee is the president of the Interdisciplinary Unification Institute, and I think you used the term transparency, but my experience tells me that, and now here is the Polish ambassador sitting at here. We all represent our government, and I used to do the job, but when you speak of transparency, you don't speak of 100 transparency, because each one of us are representing the sovereign state and sovereign government. At the same time, we need to think about, between friends and allies, the trust, mutual trust. To make trust trustworthy, then we need to make the enough degree of transparency. That's what we are trying to do and learn from each other. That is the point, and thank you very much again. Sure.
Sorry, I'm not supposed to speak so long, but I'm taking the question. You're very right, but my point was that the way we did business in the diplomatic world before has to be changed a little bit now. And not by abandoning sovereignty, we have to strengthen it. What in our Indo-Pacific strategy in France talks about partnership of sovereignty. We have to strengthen the sovereignty and strengthen the partnership at the same time. So that's the way to be stronger together. So that's the way to the challenge. But you know, if it was already done, we wouldn't need to be speaking here. You know, so that's the objective to reach, and I'm looking forward to hearing my colleagues about it. Thank you so much.
Good. Well, our next speaker is Miss Sophie LARDER, joining us online from NATO headquarters. Are you there? Are you prepared?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Good
Welcome.
morning.
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you so much. And good morning from Brussels, and good afternoon to you all there at the Jeju Forum. I am sorry not to be there in person. I would have been delighted to attend, but I'm really very happy to be presenting here at the Jeju Forum, which I think is only maybe the second time that somebody from NATO has presented there. So thank you very much for the invitation. My name is Sophie LARDER. I'm a staff officer working here on NATO's relations with the 4 Indo-Pacific partners, which I've been doing since around 2021. So today I work with Australia and New Zealand, and I worked for many years with Japan and the Republic of Korea as well. So I said it's a real pleasure and an honor to be here on the stage and virtually with you at Jeju. So I think many of my comments will be very sort of have a lot of synergy with the ambassadors who have just spoken. Indeed, and the interconnected themes that we have and the interdependence is very much reflected in my briefing. If you'll allow me, I'll go back a little bit in time first to give a little bit of the perspective about where we come from, and then talk a little bit about where we are now and our perspectives also for the future. So from us here at NATO, I would say on the Indo-Pacific cooperation, I think we completely recognize that security in the 21st century is no longer confined by geography. And this recognition we've been building over the last few years that the Euro-Atlantic and Indo-Pacific regions are indeed interconnected through security, economic, and political dynamics. But at the same time, and here comes a little bit of my history for you, I would really have to underscore that cooperation between NATO and its 4 Indo-Pacific partners, Australia, Japan, New Zealand, the Republic of Korea, is not new, actually. And we have very long-lasting bilateral relations with each of the 4 countries that go back several decades. So while we have had, obviously, in the recent years, this dramatic uplift in our cooperation together, in fact, we have this really solid basis of working together on security matters for several decades. A notable example of it is, of course, how the 4 countries stood alongside at NATO in Afghanistan through the International Security Assistance Force, and even contributed to the stabilization efforts in the Western Balkans in the 1990s. This was reminded to me the other day by the New Zealand military representative here at NATO, who was part of that effort contributing to European security back then. But I would say, and completely agreeing with the ambassador, our cooperation has always been grounded in shared values, the commitment to freedom, democracy, human rights, and the rules-based international order, coming, I think, really as the top tier of everything that we stand for and that we work on the basis of, this real basis of shared values. And I think, as we can see through this a few historic examples, we've always operated on a few common assumptions. First, that many of the security challenges we face today are global in nature, and we'll come to that in a minute. And second, that both Euro-Atlantic security dynamics and Indo-Pacific security dynamics often have global implications that stretch far beyond their borders. Now, going, of course, to 2022 here, I have to stress how much of a turning point this was for so many reasons. Of course, first and foremost is the Russian invasion of Ukraine and how the global ramifications this has had ever since. At that moment, I think I have to underscore how our 4 Indo-Pacific partners stood by Ukraine and stood next to NATO in condemning Russia and making clear their steadfast support for Ukraine from the very first moments of the invasion. Here at NATO, for example, there was a foreign ministers meeting in April 2022, mere weeks after the invasion. I remember it being particularly significant because we had the 4 Indo-Pacific partners at NATO headquarters for the first time at foreign ministers level, sitting in a meeting together with the Ukrainian foreign minister, the Georgian foreign minister, and the ministers of foreign affairs of Sweden and Finland, who were at that time still partners as well. This is a hugely, I think, symbolic moment and showed very steadfast support for Ukraine from the outset. And of course, since then, we can only express our extreme gratitude to how our Indo-Pacific partners have contributed steadfastly and significantly, whether it's through their bilateral support to Ukraine or through NATO's comprehensive assistance package, doing things like supporting NATO's efforts to rebuild Ukraine's military healthcare after the Russian invasion, to things like Australia and New Zealand's military support for Ukraine in different ways, including training Ukrainian soldiers. So they really stood out in terms of being our closest partners who've really showed that in real terms by supporting Ukraine and by supporting NATO's efforts, in this fundamental turning point for European security. And of course, as we pass the 4-year mark this February that's just gone, it continues to demonstrate how this security crisis reverberates globally. And here, we have to say this is particularly true against the backdrop of North Korea's direct military assistance to Moscow in the context of Ukraine conflict. So cooperation in 2022, as we've just spoken about, it was also a turning point for our relations with the IP4, I would say, because while there was this deep security crisis in Europe, at the same time we were facing a turning point on our own relations with the Indo-Pacific partners. And we actually sort of came to fruition in what was called the Agenda for Tackling Shared Security Challenges, which was our first ever joint document with the Indo-Pacific partners, where we agreed together, the NATO allies and the 4 partners. And NATO does a lot, through bureaucracy, through documents that we agree all together. This is our way we move. And so this was particularly significant that we agreed on the specific global security challenges, the cross-cutting transnational challenges that affect us all, and where we believe that we can do better by working together by working together, sharing best practices on areas like cyber defense, emerging and disruptive technologies, arms control, a range of other topics where we can actually boost our individual resilience in our individual regions by sharing best practices of how we both do it. And especially the Indo-Pacific partners being our most capable partners today, this was really important for NATO. 2022, I'll stop talking about in a moment, but I would say it was also very important because it was the first time that our Indo-Pacific partners came to a NATO summit in Madrid in that year, where NATO also released its strategic concept, which recognized again the first time the importance of Indo-Pacific security dynamics for Euro-Atlantic. So I would say we've really seen considerable progress since then, both on the political side of our relations, but also what I'm working on, particularly on the practical side. 2 years later in our Washington summit, we actually launched some new areas of work in what was called the flagship projects, creating sort of new expert networks on cyber defense, on responding to hybrid challenges like disinformation, on in the field of AI in the military domain, and of course on continuing that sustained support for Ukraine. And this came, of course, to last year's NATO summit in The Hague, where we did that really important joint statement where we flagged in particular the areas of defense, industrial cooperation and technology as being the topics of the future. But this is a lot about our multilateral cooperation, so NATO's work with the 4 partners together. But I also didn't want to leave unaddressed actually how strong our bilateral relationships are with each of the individual countries, and how we as NATO feel is very important to continue, because as you do not see the Euro-Atlantic as a whole continuum, we likewise, we recognize that the Indo-Pacific is extremely diverse, extremely different security perceptions, and that's why we really prioritize also our bilateral relations with each of the 4 Indo-Pacific partners. We have with each of them what's called an individually tailored partnership program for 4 years, which is our real guiding document and aims to really determine and then address deepen cooperation across a range of different goals. And it's very different for each of the 4 Indo-Pacific partners. And these were mostly agreed in 2023. And I was going to talk a little bit here about the role of the Republic of Korea in this respect, because obviously it has its own individually tailored partnership program, its own ITPP with NATO. And it's about working together. We have specific lines of cooperation, arms control and non-proliferation. Obviously, the Republic of Korea brings specific and unique expertise on this topic to NATO. And we have a lot of in-depth conversations about this, where NATO provides an excellent platform of 32 allies for the Republic of Korea to actually come and discuss in particular the proliferation challenges emanating from North Korea. We have really strong cooperation with the Republic of Korea, in particular on cyber defense. They hosted, of course, the Cyber Champions Summit in Seoul last year, and we have really good cyber staff talks. And they also participated in several NATO cyber exercises, so addressing somewhat the interoperability aspect that the ambassador was talking about. I think going forward, the Republic of Korea has already demonstrated and will continue to, I'm sure, show how important defense industrial cooperation will be now and in the future. As you know, NATO allies are spending more on defense. We are ramping up our defense production here in Europe, but we're also looking to work with our partners across the globe on this, and the Republic of Korea with its highly capable defense industry, its existing relations with a number of allies, and its real willingness to work together with us on that, with allies and with some groups of NATO countries and with NATO as a whole, is really something that we want to deepen in the future. I think another aspect that we here see as being hugely of potential is in the field of innovation and technology, in particular how these relate to the military domain. Of course, NATO and its closest partners, we share, I think, a common belief in the importance in maintaining the technological edge in the defense domain. And this is why we're looking at working together in a range of these topics, including through our flagship projects, where we had a specific project on artificial intelligence in the military domain, and recognizing, of course, the Republic of Korea has a specific role in this through its previous hosting of the Re-AIM Summit a couple of years ago. A final topic I would talk about with specific reference to Korea is space. Indeed, and NATO has a particular interest in working in this in the future. We're developing new multinational capability projects where we're keen to work with our Indo-Pacific partners on things like space launch capabilities and joining together our space industries for the future. So we can all ensure we have resilient access to space. So just to draw all these remarks to a conclusion, we see an excellent future for NATO's Indo-Pacific relations and a special role for the Republic of Korea there indeed, along with the other Indo-Pacific partners. I wanted to also just touch very briefly on, though, addressing sort of misinformation about NATO's work with the Indo-Pacific partners that we see have been seen has been widespread in recent years. And I want to emphasize that NATO is a political military alliance, but it's a political military alliance of the Euro-Atlantic region. There's never been any sense that we would come to the Indo-Pacific as a security provider. That is really not what our cooperation is about. It's about working with our closest and most capable partners who share our values on global security challenges that affect us both in our individual regions, and about doing better in our own regions at security by sharing our capabilities and our best practices and our lessons learned on dealing with all these challenges together. So a very strong relations for the future. We're looking forward to that. We also, I wanted to say just a last word to say thank you for the Jeju Forum in particular to hosting this. It is a part of our work of the new Indo-Pacific and Euro-Atlantic Hub for Shared Security Challenges, which is also an effort aimed at ensuring we can raise awareness of what NATO's work with the Indo-Pacific means for global audiences in this context where of systemic competition, hybrid challenges, the challenge of disinformation. So thank you to you all, and it's a pleasure to speak here.
Thank you, Ms. Larder, for your very comprehensive opinion. And you have touched upon very important areas of cooperation from military-industrial cooperation, innovation, to the political-military cooperation as well. But underneath, well, you have mentioned at the outset that supporting Ukraine is very important. That's what triggered the cooperation between NATO and IP4 cooperation in 2022. You mentioned the North Korean factor as well. And Ukraine has changed many things and hurt many things, including the liberal international order and multilateralism are under attack as well. Especially we have the United States under President Trump administration. They have, I think, in strained relationship with NATO, and U.S. is demanding, sometimes asking and demanding the renewed relationship and the so-called evolving alliance system. That is all the questions we need to deal with. But we cannot do it alone. Individually, we need to do that in cooperation of each other, based upon shared values and strategic objectives. Thank you very much. And you shortly mentioned individually tailored the cooperation. I think Dr. Park Dong-jun has something to say about that, along with ROK's role in the promoting cooperation with NATO. So, Dr. Park, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Dong-jun Park. Let me just begin by saying what an honor it is to share a stage with such dignitaries. I do feel a bit out of place, to be honest, and a bit overwhelmed, but I think my strategy for this situation for me would be to kind of limit. Many of the comments that I did prepare do overlap with what Ambassador PURCARESCU and Ms. Larder has already talked about. So let me skip over those, keep my comments as brief as possible, and try to get to the point. So I was also going to begin with interconnectedness, interoperability. I think as much as we are concerned about deglobalization, I think we are realizing just how interconnected and how difficult it is to disconnect from this environment, whether it's because of the nature of how the theaters are connected security-wise, how we increasingly talk about security and economics being connected, and also just the nature of cyberspace being where a lot of the disruptive technologies that Ms. Larder also referred to operates in. So there's no denying that. And so that's kind of the basic background for NATO-IP4 cooperation. In terms of where we are, Ms. Larder talked about the history, having been about 4 years with this new grouping, this new concept. What's always been interesting for me is the loose and informal nature, how it's a very interesting mix of bilateral and multilateral relations. First with individual IP4 countries, with NATO, which in itself is multilateral, and also IP4 being this grouping of Indo-Pacific countries that share values and also have each bilateral cooperation with NATO itself. So it's always been interesting. And so as we move forward, I've always been curious, and I would also, if we have an opportunity, to kind of hear how each side wants to proceed in terms of institutionalization. So is this current format kind of preferred? Is it the new version of unilateralism in the region, or is it in the earlier stages of moving towards greater institutionalization? It'll include not just different treaties or agreements, but also, as Ambassador PURCARESCU referred to, continued dialogues. So is that enough, or do we, or as a group, do we want more? And also particularly with amongst the IP4 countries itself, which I believe is, maybe this is not the correct term, but maybe the weakest link, perhaps, since we aren't seeing as much cooperation among the IP4 countries themselves. So I think that's where we are. Moving forward, the obvious external challenges, there are two, I believe. One is China and how it perceives IP4, which, again, Ms. Larder kind of referred to. But also, the other elephant in the room would be the US and how the current Trump administration has changed a lot of how we think about alliances traditionally. Obviously, there's a lot that President Trump can do in the remaining 3 years, but what will be the long-lasting impacts that he leaves, his legacy leaves, and how does that continue? Or are we perhaps wishfully thinking that things will return to the past, where will be considered normal in terms of alliance politics? And so those are kind of two lingering questions. The other, I think, perhaps the contribution that I would like to make is looking inwards. And so thinking about domestic policy a little bit. And I want to talk about perceptions. And I think what I wanted to emphasize was how, in my view, there might be 3 or so perception lags or gaps that exists perhaps between elites, which I refer to as experts and practitioners, and the general public. And so it's a common theme in international relations theory, but I think there are 3 different perception gaps that might need to be addressed in order for us to continue this cooperation, because as democracies, we are vulnerable to regime changes, and I think with whatever form institutionalization takes, I think we need sustained cooperation more than anything else. So the 3 types of perception gaps that I would like to identify and pose to the room. First, I think with the first is the today's security environment. So this is something that Ambassador PURCARESCU and Ms. Larder much more eloquently described than I could possibly do. But I think practitioners and experts that really study this field understand that it's connected, interconnected in so many different ways. But I wonder if the public actually realizes this as much. And kind of related to this, the various forms of interconnectedness, again, I think the public is getting more aware of how interconnected we are. But the point that I really wanted to emphasize was how they're reacting to that change. And I'm hoping that, again, as practitioners, as people, policymakers, and as experts, I think the elite circles have embraced this change and realized that this is the path forward and we have to respond to this new reality. But I think there's a lag in terms of how willing the public actually is to accept that this is the change that's occurring and perhaps a little scared of what that means in terms of how security changes and how this relationship itself might lead to more threats rather than the ones that they're actually trying to solve. And so those are the two perception gaps that I wanted to begin with. The third, and I think this was mentioned by Ms. Larder, but NATO's identity. I think after the Cold War ended, it definitely, NATO shifted more towards a political military alliance more than simply just a military alliance. The events of the 2020, the past few years have definitely, I think, shifted it back towards a more traditional military role. Here in Korea, there are still that firmly kind of distinguish between NATO and perhaps Europe, the European Union, kind of in the different roles that they play. And so viewing NATO as more of a security alliance, I think makes it more difficult perhaps for Indo-Pacific countries to really accept this new, the need for this new cooperation because of how it might entice fears of entanglement and being drawn into conflicts that perhaps the individual countries, or especially in the public, might not actually be willing to participate in. And so going back to the, to kind of wrap up my comments, I think having the opportunity to be involved a little with the Korean hub and what NATO is trying to do with this initiative, I think I've heard many of my colleagues mention how it's about public awareness, and I think Ms. Larder mentioned that as well. And so bringing it back to my points, I think, yes, it is important to educate the public itself, but I think it's more important perhaps to understand or try to empathize with the public and how they might have fears of the changes that are occurring, and maybe kind of console the public in a way that makes it more possible to persuade the broader public about the need for continued cooperation, not only with NATO from the perspective of South Korea, but also from the perspective of South Korea's cooperation with other IP4 members as well within this context. So with that, I would like to conclude my remarks and thank you for this opportunity. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Well, interconnectedness may be the key words of our discussion today. You mentioned the several points that could be the problems politically as well as diplomatically. You mentioned about the Chinese negative perception and also domestic public opinions perception. And yes, mentally and psychologically, the entanglement is always a fighting words in relations with abandonment when it comes to bilateral the alliance system, but we're talking about the two groups cooperating each other with the continent apart. So yes, that's a challenge that politicians and experts need to persuade the public minds as well. Well, we have heard three speakers, presenters, and we have two expert discussants, starting from Dr. Lee Shin-hwa, President, Institute of Interdisciplinary Unification Studies at Korea University.
Thank you, Ambassador Kim. And I also would like to give thanks to the Korean Academic Council on UN System to invite me over here. Well, today we haven't received any presentation note in advance, so probably I will just respond mainly to what I heard today, and also what I have thought as the central strategic meaning of Indo-Pacific and NATO cooperation. Well, I think my main takeaway is NATO-IP4 cooperation should not be understood as NATO's geographical expansion into Asia or the other way around, but it should be understood as a response to security connectivity, as our presenter, particularly Ms. Lasner, was mentioned since 2022 Ukraine war in the first place. But ultimately, probably our bilateral or our cooperation can be aimed for so-called achieving global common goods in the end. So the real issue is not whether NATO is moving east, but the real issue is the Europe, Atlantic, and Indo-Pacific security are already connected through conventional military threat and non-traditional security issues, and functional issues, as our presenter has mentioned, such as technology, cyberspace, even space, and supply chain, and the shared value to deal with authoritarian consolidation and erosion of international norms. So this framing matters, in my opinion, because if NATO-IP4 cooperation is described as a so-called Asian NATO, or as a military containment coalition against China, it will be politically divisive and strategically counterproductive. But if it is framed as rule-based resilience of democratic multilateralism, the issue I will mention in a few minutes, then it becomes both more legitimate and more useful. So having said that, in the interest of time, let me be brief to mention for the 3 points. The first, as I mentioned, NATO-IP cooperation is not about geography. It is about the connectivity, or if I can quote from our presenters, interconnectivity of threats. Russia's war against Ukraine is not only a European war. North Korea's military cooperation with Russia, the deepening China-Russia partnership, and cyber attacks, disinformation, economic coercion, and supply chain vulnerability, all those things show that security crises are no longer regionally contained. A war in Europe affects ammunition stocks, energy markets, defense production, nuclear signaling, and alliance credibility in Asia. Likewise, instability on the Korean Peninsula, a Taiwan contingency, maritime coercion, or disruptions in semiconductor supply chains would immediately affect Europe's economy and security. So we should not ask whether NATO is entering Asia. That is the wrong question. We should ask how Europe and the Indo-Pacific or Asia can manage shared vulnerabilities without creating unnecessary bloc politics that might disturb both US and China, what we call superpowers. So NATO-IP cooperation should be seen as an institutional response to interdependence, as our Ambassador Kim Sook has mentioned, under threat. Second, NATO-IP cooperation should develop through functional depth, not alliance enlargement. Since this session is talking about the role of South Korea, from Korea's perspectives, extending Article 5 logic to the Indo-Pacific is neither realistic nor desirable. Korea already has the US-Korea alliance as the foundation of our deterrence. What NATO-IP cooperation can add is not another collective defense commitment, but a dense network of what I call practical cooperation and also normative cooperation. The most promising areas are clear. Where once again, cyber defense, AI and emerging technology standards, space security, maritime domain awareness, defense industrial cooperation, ammunition and munitions production, shipbuilding, protection of critical infrastructure, counter disinformation, military medical support, civil preparedness, and supply chain resilience, to name a few. These are not technical side issues. They are now central to modern deterrence and crisis management. For Korea, this means going to Ankara this early July, it's coming early July, not only with general diplomatic statements, but with concrete proposals. As I mentioned, defense production cooperation and cyber resilience exercise, AI safety, governance dialogue, maritime security cooperation, and humanitarian or reconstruction support for Ukraine, where Korea has comparative strength and rationales to pursue. Third, I would say Korea, based on what I said up to now, Korea is in a very distinctive position to be a strategic interconnector rather than a mere participant of NATO-IP cooperation. It is anchored in US-Korea alliance, but it has also expanding ties with NATO and the European Union and the G7 Plus framework and the Camp David Trilateral framework with US and Japan and economic security platform and UN-centered multilateralism. And as Dr. Park has mentioned, our bilateral and multilateral cooperation among IP countries. So Korea can connect these platforms rather than choose among them. This is why Korea's role should be understood not merely as that of an important partner, but increasingly as a trusted insider in a wider network of cooperation. In that sense, Ambassador PURCARESCU said, our relation has to be more reliable and more predictable, and I fully agree with what you mentioned. Of course, Korea is not a NATO member, but within NATO-IP4 cooperation, if the framework becomes more networked and institutionalized, Korea can become a trusted and capable partner from within the partnership structure, particularly in areas where capability matters more than geography. Since I think I use up my things here, let me summarize what I would like to offer you. Okay. Sorry. I have some questions as well. Korea so as a NATO-IP cooperation becomes more practical, technical, and industrial, we should not allow the normative agenda or issues to sideline. The liberal international order was never only about deterrence and supply chain. It was also about international law, norms, human rights, democratic accountability, and humanitarian protection. This is especially relevant for Korea. North Korea's nuclear weapon, cyber theft, overseas labor exploitation, military cooperation with Russia, and human rights abuse should not be treated as separate issues. They are part of the same governance and security challenge. North Korea's human rights are not merely a humanitarian question, but that is the North Korea's military threat and the human rights abuses are two sides of the same coin. I'm not talking about that because I have a former ambassador of international cooperation on North Korean human rights, but I'm saying this because it is true. As a scholarly debate also mentioned about those things as well. I do believe that same is true of Ukraine. Support for Ukraine is not only a military issue, it is also a question of whether aggression, territorial conquest, attacks on civilians, and violation of international law will be normalized. if those norms weaken in Europe, the consequences will be felt on the Korean Peninsula and across the Indo-Pacific. So, values and practicality should not be separated. Democracy, human rights, and the rule-based order should not remain abstract diplomatic language. They should be connected to concrete policy, cyber resilience, and all other issues, humanitarian assistance and defense supply chain integrity, to name a few. So let me end with two brief questions. To Ambassador PURCARESCU, how can France balance strategic autonomy, NATO cooperation, and the EU Indo-Pacific strategy, while assuring partners like Korea that its inclusive partnership, non-bloc politics, will not weaken deterrence or rule-based resilience? I'm saying this because the more our relation is getting stronger, the stronger resistance or opposition might come from Korea and from China to Korea. That's why I'm asking you. And to Ms. Sophie Lardner, how can NATO make IP4 cooperation institutionally durable without creating the perception of an Asian NATO? What would be the most useful practical mechanism? And to Dr. Park, what would be the Korea's most important strategy when it comes to promote the NATO and Indo-Pacific cooperation? What area and what principle we should sustain? So I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. All three presenters got the question, each of you, and don't forget about that. And we will hear from you after we hear from Ambassador Kim. But before that, you have pointed out you have clarified very good point that this should not be perceived as the formation of another bloc or another military alliance. A year or two ago, I think it was derived from Japan, that there was a floating idea to form the Asian NATO, and there was opposition from China, of course, and there was some concerns expressed within Korea as well. So I think we need to clarify about what we are talking about, and I thank for your pointing out that. So last but not least, Ambassador Kim, would you make your comment on that?
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me to this important event. It is a great honor and privilege to participate in the NATO-IP4 cooperation session at the Jeju Forum. It has been helpful to listen to the various views on this issue from European colleagues and experts. It also reminded me of my participating in NATO-IP4 meetings in Brussels at an ambassador level. And it leads to the discussion of NATO's relationship with Russia, China, and relationship between United States and Europe, and also North Korea. They say fires are breaking out everywhere in the world. People are asking, what about this, the world? For one, the war between Russia and Ukraine is the largest one since World War II, demonstrating the end of post-Cold War era. Especially North Korea's deployment of troops to Russia marks a fundamental shift in security relations between Europe and East Asia. This is the first time in a century that Russia has invited foreign troops into the country. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said, in what is known as a devil's deal, North Korea supplies Russia with artillery shells, missiles, and troops in exchange for Russia's foreign currency, oil, and military technology. North Korea's assistance altered the course of the war. What Russia will provide to North Korea is a major concern. If core strategic weapon technology is provided, it can be a game changer in the Indo-Pacific region. Prime Minister Mark Carney of Canada said at the Davos Forum last January, "We are in the middle of a rupture, not a transition. The old order is not coming back. Whether the old order is gone forever is a million-dollar question." At the Rishina Dialogue last March, President Alexander Stubb of Finland said, "We human beings have a tendency to make three mistakes. We over-rationalize the past, we over-dramatize the present, we end up underestimating the future." He added, "Does this mean that liberal world order is dead? No, it does not. The fact that the rules are broken does not make all the system null and void, any more than someone getting caught for speeding makes speeding limits irrelevant." It is true that NATO shows signs of weakening with an internal split between the United States and Europe. However, it was just 2 years ago that President Biden pronounced NATO the single greatest, most effective defensive alliance in the history of the world. He added, "Can NATO adapt to new changes?" And he answered, "At every time, we proved we could adapt." Despite the significant geographical distance between NATO and Korea, there have been parallel developments. NATO transformed itself as a result of the Korean War from North Atlantic Treaty to NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. There had been no organization before. The Korean War led to the establishment of a permanent civilian secretariat. Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe's shape, and to the appointment of a Secretary General and the Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, SACEUR. In December 2005, Ban Ki-moon visited NATO headquarters and delivered a speech to the North Atlantic Council. For the first time as the Korean foreign minister, Korea became a NATO contact country in 2006 and a global partner in 2008. In July 2023, Korea and NATO signed an individually tailored partnership program, ITPP, to cooperate in 11 areas, including counterterrorism, disarmament and non-proliferation, emerging technologies, and cybersecurity. Korea and NATO worked especially closely together on cybersecurity issues and Afghanistan issues. NATO has been inviting 4 Indo-Pacific nations, Korea, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand, to each summit since 2022, reflecting the view that development in Indo-Pacific region directly affect Euro-Atlantic security. NATO has concerns about China. In December 2019, NATO mentioned China for the first time in a policy document. It was a single sentence. China's growing influence and international policies present both opportunities and challenges. Former NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said NATO has not approached China, but that China has approached NATO in Africa, the Arctic Ocean, and cyberspace. Since July 2023 NATO summit, China has been described as a systemic challenge.
In a minute.
Yes. As NATO members remind themselves, the distance between Pyongyang and Brussels is shorter than that between Pyongyang and Canberra. We appreciate NATO's interest in this issue, and we are living in a closely interconnected world. As European colleagues mentioned, we do better by working together. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and I'm sorry to interrupt you in the middle, but we have less than 10 minutes, and you have made 3 questions each to each presenter. So allow me to be cruel to the presenters, and I'll give you each 3 minutes to answer. Yes, starting with the Ambassador PURCARESCU.
Thank you very much. So the question was how we balance strategic autonomy with all this partnership and cooperation. Well, believe me, it's very easy because we've been doing it for 50 years. So when I started my career, not 50 years ago, a bit less, but still, as a desk officer for NATO and the EU on defense capabilities, France was the only country talking about strategic autonomy, and it was not very fashionable at that time, and everybody was looking at us and wondering if we were a good ally and a good partner because we use the word autonomy. To us, it's never been about being alone. Autonomy means you're playing your cards to the maximum, and you are doing your own resilience before going and talk to your partners about them being showing solidarity to you. And in my experience, aiming for autonomy, which is a very serious effort, it doesn't happen because you decide it happens. It happens because you put your resources and your energy behind it. The more autonomous you are, the louder you can speak, and people listen to you because they see you're determined. And searching for strategic autonomy can be at several levels. You have to show that you're doing your own duties at home, so you have to invest and you have to work hard, and you need to be consistent about it. And then you play it at a higher level. The European Union is about building this interdependency and solidarity, but not by shifting the burden to the neighbor, but by doing, everybody does its part and it's bringing something to the table. So this is how we balance it. The stronger we are, the more we affirm and stress on our sovereignty, the better we can speak to the other partners, including those that are disturbing and challenging partners. So that's how we do it. Thank you.
Very good, excellent. Ms. Sophie LARDER, are you there to answer the question?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much. And thank you for the really very interesting remarks of everybody. It's been very interesting to hear. So the question I got from you is, how can NATO make sure that the Indo-Pacific partners' our cooperation remains durable without being institutionalized? I think this is a really super interesting question, because actually I think our strength in NATO's IP4 partnership work is the fact that it's very not institutional. It's always been a very flexible format. And I think you trace that back through the history that Ambassador Kim would remember being in the North Atlantic Council, is that we meet and we met, for the first time, for example, in the North Atlantic Council with these 4 partners in the 2016 period to actually address North Korea's missile launches at the time. So it was a decision by NATO to invite the 4 partners with whom we shared the closest links, the longest ties, and sort of the shared values to address a global security challenge at the time. So it shows how flexible our work is in responding to, I think, challenges as they arrive. And I think that's its strength. And there's really no sense there's a plans to do any sort of institutionalization, because I agree with you. Its strength is in its flexibility of that we can work together, we can meet at different levels. We have our Indo-Pacific partners here almost daily at NATO headquarters, working with us at the working level, or our ambassadors meeting in the North Atlantic Council a few times a year, or the ministerial level. So, and also on the military side as well. So that's really our strength. I think the durability question, though, is interesting, and I just wanted to touch on it very briefly. And I think that's a part of the question our flagship projects are aiming to answer. Is we launched these in 2024, and they were really the start of expert networks between NATO allies and the Indo-Pacific partners on a range of topics that we thought were the most pressing and the most important to work together on. So this is why now we have growing expert to expert sort of networks on topics like cyber defense through our cyber champions, regular annual meetings. We just had the last one in the Czech Republic a couple of months ago, where our cyber defense experts come together and discuss the best ways to address the challenge emanating in cyberspace. Or on AI in the military domain, as I mentioned earlier, one of our flagship projects is about linking up our experts in NATO, in the Indo-Pacific partners, and across allied capitals who are working on this cutting edge issue of AI and how does it relate to military domain and military capabilities, and the responsible use of it in particular. Because I think it's important as well. I think it was Professor Lee who mentioned that we shouldn't lose sight of the normative side. Norms matter, and I think we can safely say that across the expert to expert work across these capabilities, it's always underpinned with that shared recognition of that it needs to be based on values and our shared interest in ensuring democracy and open societies and the rule of law. And that's really what we base all of this work on. And what we're really trying to work together on is ensuring that the rules of the future in all these important areas really reflect how our values that we want to continue. Thanks.
Well, thank you. Thank you for excellent question and excellent answer as well. So lastly, Dr. Park.
Yes, so the question I believe that I received was Korea's approach or Korea's priorities in terms of cooperation. The short answer, I think, would be cybersecurity, although, since it has been the most promising, although I would like to add that what I would like to see personally is how we move beyond just cybersecurity, but to broader issues such as the data economy or data sovereignty, and bringing that into the fold in terms of cooperation. I really appreciated Ambassador PURCARESCU's comments about autonomy, because that was what I also wanted to say about Korea's approach. And I think we shouldn't be afraid of being frank with each other. I was looking at the recent joint statement between South Korea and the EU, and was quite surprised how long it was and how comprehensive it was. And I think that's good. That's good that we have a lot that we could work together with. But I do fear that also opens the possibility of a trap of actually not getting anywhere. So I think it's definitely positive, and I think, as the only non-diplomat here, I'm being this blunt, but I'm sure behind the scenes we are having these frank conversations about where truly we can cooperate with. And I think it goes back to the point about what Professor Lee mentioned about having this understanding that we do have these shared values, and it's important to do that. But hopefully behind the scenes and among diplomats, we are frank with each other about what we truly need from each other, and can really focus our attention to those areas rather than trying to do too much at the same time. So, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's time to wrap up. And even though, as Professor Lee has noted, that we didn't have chance to exchange notes in advance, but well, I found that the interconnectivity is a key word for us because security of the Euro-Atlantic is closely interconnected with that of the Indo-Pacific. And I think we have all agreed on shared values and the direction of the cooperation in detailed fashions as well. But due to the time constraint and the topic itself, we missed other related themes like U.S. policy and President Trump's personal style and his direction, which really matters as well, and North Korean issue as well. Yeah. And still, I think U.S. global leadership should not be written off. Yeah, we need to appreciate and do not give the U.S. side that we are making another home, not divorcing to U.S., both in terms of NATO and Indo-Pacific as well. And the Ambassador Kim has mentioned, quoted the Canadian Prime Minister's $1 million, the question like that. It's still a question, and but maybe we have passed beyond the point that to ask whether this is the temporary aberration or beginning of the permanent departure from the world what we know. So that we are, well, as the Winston Churchill used to say, if you find yourself in hell, keep going. So we need to keep going with the spirit of mutual cooperation between NATO and Indo-Pacific partners. And I appreciate the participants here and the gallery as well. Great gathering here. This concludes our session. Thank you very much.